Hello, everyone. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr., Senior VP, Executive Editor-Large at Black Enterprise, the #1 Black media platform with more than 8 million unique visitors a month. And I want to welcome you to another edition, a really exciting and interesting edition, an important edition of Beyond the Hype. Today, I have with me Deborah O. Farmer, who is the founder of Brown Farmer Media Group, but is here to talk with me in another capacity as an adoptive mother and a champion of Black adoption, and the author of My Journey to Joshua. Great book, just came out. I've just read it, Finding Love Through God's Grace and Adoption. Welcome to the show, Deborah.
Thank you so very much for having me. I'm super excited to spend this afternoon with you. I really appreciate the invitation and I'm looking forward to it.
So before we jump into the core of our conversation, which is I really want to talk about Black adoption, its importance, and particularly as families, all kinds of families were impacted during the past 18 months and still being impacted through the pandemic. And I know you have a particular passion for being a champion for Black males. So let's get an idea of people understanding who you are as a person, as a professional, and what, even before we get to your journey to Joshua.
Sure. So, at my core, I like to look at myself as a blend of an island girl and a girl from the South. My dad's from Barbados and my mom is from Greenwood, Mississippi. So if you blend the two of those, wonderful cultures together, you get me. I was born and raised on the South side of Chicago, in the Roseland community is where I grew up. Most of us refer to that as the Wild Wild Hundreds, affectionately known as the Wild Wild Hundreds. While living in Chicago, I went to various schools. I went to undergrad at Lewis University in Romeoville, where I studied radio and television broadcasting. Soon after being armed with my degree, I went on to work for WGN Television, where I worked as a producer for many years, and then moving over to another station in Chicago, NBC5 Television, where I was able to blend who I am at my core, a natural giver, and also my love for the media industry. So I worked in the capacity of Director of Station Relations and Community Affairs. So at my core, I'm just a South Side girl from Chicago who loves to give back to the community.
So talk to me, and again, I want to show the book again, because I urge you guys to get this book. It's a quick read, but it's a good, thought-provoking read, particularly, and you'll get into it deeper, when you talk about both the opportunity and the need for more people to consider becoming an adoptive parent. And I want to note, one of the people who's written a liner note on the book is a friend of mine, Hill Harper, who, of course, is an adoptive parent as well. Yeah. And I remember when he told me he was going to do this, and, I had a lot of questions to ask him, and it's just very, very interesting about his decision to do this. And I know It dovetails greatly with what you decided to do. Talk about the book, talk about your journey to Joshua. Let's talk, before that journey and what led you to ultimately become an adoptive mother.
Sure. So again, as I mentioned, at my core, I am a natural nurturer. I love to give back to the community. Being a member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, we did tons of, public service projects and things of that sort, where I was able to touch and feel people that weren't on the same level with you in a lot of cases, economically, even, mentally, spiritually. So being able to provide a service has always been something that I love to do. I was introduced to an organization, the Ulick Children's Advantage Network, in the late 90s, where I met a young lady that I began mentoring. And as I mentored her, she was actually in foster care. So that was my first introduction to foster care, was meeting this young lady. And, during my time, technically, it was just to be a year's time of, helping her with her homework. She then became integrated into my family, where she was a member of our family. A 1-year relationship as a tutor turned into a 25-plus-year relationship. But what I realized and experienced during her time as a foster child was just how she was sort of bounced around from home to home. And at one point, while mentoring her, I wanted to foster her. I was in my early 20s at the time, advised against it, but I always knew that was something I wanted to do. My family, they thought her situation might be a little bit too much for me to handle as a single person. So I always knew in the back of my mind that eventually I would want to have children of my own, but also I wanted to foster a child and one day adopt a child. So that's how I got introduced into this space.
So talk to me about you're a successful young professional. And a lot when people think of adoption, they have a very narrow perspective of what it means to even make that choice, what they need to be able to do emotionally, economically, financially. And then you have the other spectrum, which is when you talk about who gets adopted, Black children, Black male children in particular, are at a particular disadvantage. They're less likely to be adoptive. It's harder to find adoptive parents for them. So talk to me about what made you decide as a young, single, free professional, you got it going on, you could be living your best life, say, you know what? Yeah, I am living my best life with Joshua.
Yeah.
But what talk about the thought process that you navigated on the way to become an adoptive mother, and even some of the stories that you share in your journey to Joshua, because it wasn't a straight line. It wasn't, I'm going to be an adoptive mother and then Joshua shows up and it's magic. Right. Talk about both the administrative challenges, the legal journey, and your own emotional journey with regard to what you were trying to accomplish.
Sure. Well, the first place for me to start is, I was born a mother. My late grandmother would oftentimes share this story whenever she had an opportunity in front of anyone that she found would listen. And I had a younger cousin, so we would play house, right? That's what little girls do. And my grandmother would say, well, let Nikki be the mother. And then I would say, well, it's going to be two mamas. So I always knew I wanted to be a mother. And when I think about, again, having had the connection to the young lady in foster care, I knew that was something I wanted to do. I then went through the process of getting my foster care license. And so going through that process, and you mentioned, boys in particular are usually the last ones to either be thought of in this process of adoption. I could say I was in that number. I wanted a little girl. I had a house on the south side of Chicago in Beverly. I had gotten my foster care license. I painted the room pink and I was ready for a little girl. But they kept calling with boys. And so, you have to at some point, and this is advice I provide to anyone considering this, a lot of it is ego-based, right? You find yourself being the barrier. It's not the child, it's not the system. Sometimes you are the barrier. And so I had to remove my ego and decide, you know what? I need to consider that if I want to be a mother, I don't get to choose whether it's a boy or a girl. And so going through that process again, I was, after I had received my foster care license as a single woman, I got married. And so then I had my was husband at the time to, obtain his foster care license. While doing that, we were actually going through fertility treatments because, again, I still wanted to be a mother. It wasn't that adoption was my only option. It became an option. And so I want to make that clear as well. It wasn't that this was like the last resort, if you will. Again, we were going through fertility treatment. So that's a whole nother discussion in itself, is Black women having that conversation about infertility. But to that end, they kept calling with boys. And so we had to, surrender to either being a mom of a girl or a boy, or just being a mom. And so after, again, being placed, we were placed with the call with our son. He was actually born at a hospital on the west side of Chicago. We got him a few days after birth, and he's, came into our home as a foster child. And then we had to go through the legal process of actually having the bio dad's rights terminated. So then that way he became our forever child.
I think you make a really great point. You made it just now, and you make it in the book, that adoption is one of many paths to parenthood. It's neither better nor worse, and it doesn't have to be a last resort. That maybe it really shouldn't be a last resort. You should be adopting because you really want to parent a child, not because, oh, this is the only way I can do it, and this is kind of a desperation move, because obviously that will affect the quality in your mindset in terms of your approach to parenting, especially because raising children, no matter what their source is,
Raising
another human being is a challenge.
Yes.
Someone who's raised four, it's okay. It's not a game, it's not a joke. So you really do have to come with the right heart and the right mindset for it. But talk to me as a young professional woman. Married. You approached this as a married woman at the time, but ultimately as a single woman. I'm gonna say this: a lot of people would have said, "You know what? I was down for this when I was when I was married, but I don't know if I really want to take this on as a single parent." Talk to me about, and it may not have been a struggle for you, so I don't want to read into or to speak for you, but what was your mindset as you get married, and I'm someone who's multiple times divorced, so nobody gets married because they think they're going to get a divorce down the road.
No.
So you went into this with a certain family assumption with regard. But you came out of it, yet you still chose to take this journey with Joshua. Talk to me about what that was like for you intellectually and emotionally.
That's actually a very dynamic question. And I'll start back here again. When I was going through this process, I was a single woman. When I obtained my foster care license, I was not married. And so when I then got married, because I still wanted to do this, I then had my husband to go through the process. I will tell you, because I was married, I then surrendered. And I hate to say it like a negative, but I did not have the forethought to have a boy as a child. I figured, and this is again the barriers that we put in place and the mindset that sometimes we have, that, okay, let's take a boy because I had a husband in the home to be able to help me raise the boy. So that was my mindset at that particular time. And as we know, if you want to see God laugh, make plans, my favorite scripture is Jeremiah 29:11, is for he knows the thoughts and the plans that he has for us. And so in that, unfortunately, the marriage dissolved, and I then still had to be a mother of a single mother of a boy. And so then how do you approach that situation? I give references in the book where I was in this situation before. I have a younger brother who lived in St. Lucia at the time with my stepmother, and I brought him to the States as a single woman to live with me in the States. And what I ended up doing was surrounding him with all of my positive male friends. And so it takes a village. And so now I'm on this journey as a single mom of a boy. It takes a village, which is why I moved from Chicago to Georgia, because I have a lot of friends that have kids his age here. And I wanted him to be able to grow up and be a boy, to thrive with other kids his age. And so it was a shifting. And I had to have the grit and the fortitude to just, again, as I say, take the journey and to take it with God at the center of it all. Because again, I had plans of my own and those were derailed, if you will.
Listen, before we go any deeper, because I do want to talk about the larger opportunities and challenges and the need for more people like you, to look at adoption as a path, more people like you, more people like Hill Harper and others, including some famous people you identify in the book, who I think was really great. Because some people I knew about, and it was other people like I didn't know that they were adoptive parents, or I knew they were parents, but I didn't know that their child was adopted. So it was very fascinating. And I got some very, very good friends, including my former Black Enterprise colleague, a sister to me, Caroline Clark Graves, who wrote a book finding her adoptive mother.
Oh, wow.
Who was her father was Nat King Cole.
Oh my goodness!
So it's just very, very. No, that's not true. Let me take it back. Her mother was the daughter of Nat King Cole.
Wow.
Her biological mother. And so again, so this is something that's passionate for me, because I got a lot of good friends who either are adopted or have adopted, in some cases both.
Yeah.
But I say all that to say, tell me about Joshua. We're talking about him. He's the star of the story.
He is.
And the star of your book, Journey to Joshua. He was your destination. You didn't know that's where you were headed.
Yeah.
But talk to me about Joshua and what it means, who he is, and what it means to be his mom.
Yeah. It's so funny. The interesting part about Joshua, and you just said he's the star, is that he knows he's the star. It's so weird just how, of course, with technology these days, the kids are on YouTube and things of that sort. So he follows a lot of, young influencers, the superhero kids and Goo Goo Gaga and all these others. And there's these two girls, Jillian and Addie, and they have merchandise and they're always talking about buy my merch. And so Joshua says the same thing. He has books. Oh, buy my merchandise or buy my hoodie, things of that sort. He is just a gregarious little boy. He's so loving. He's so
How old is Joshua now?
He's 5. He's 5.
Wow.
And as mentioned again, he's been with us since birth. And so, this is my boy. He loves his mother so much. He's so loving. He puts his hand on my heart and he just says, I love your heart, mommy. He's an artist. He's funny. He loves to dance. He's just a great kid. And he's really thriving here in the Atlanta, Georgia area, having a really good time as a boy.
Now, you wrote My Journey to Joshua to tell your story, but you also wrote with a bigger mission to inspire, encourage, debunk some myths in some cases, to get more people to consider adopting, particularly Black people adopting Black kids. And I want to couch the next part of our conversation around what we've been through and are still going through, which has affected families of every type in every way. And I don't think that we really thought about what it means for, even people who are already in the adoption process and how the pandemic and other issues may have even disrupted that process or created even a greater need than before the pandemic for people to consider adoption. Give us and give the Beyond the Hype audience a lay of the land. What did you see before? What did you see during? And what are you seeing now with regard to this whole issue of adoption?
Yeah, interestingly enough, there was when I was going through the process and he had to go to the courts to actually have his rights terminated, there's an organization called CASA, Court Appointed Special Advocates. And so these are people that sort of stand in proxy for the child. Most cases, if kids come from, a system, and I'll say Chicago, Department of Children and Family Services, there's often a representative to help them navigate through the process. What we found is, since the pandemic has hit, that things are virtual. So when you think about these children that had caseworkers to actually come in and check in on them, they had to do a lot of that stuff virtually. So sadly, I'm sure there's more incidents going on now than ever before because you're not able to touch and feel and see and check on the well-being of children in the way that you once did. Another layer to that too, and this is partly why I was inspired to do the book, is that there were so many people along the journey for me when Joshua was placed that said, I always wanted to do that. And they don't. And so as I look at, if I were to not have Joshua, I couldn't imagine being in a position to live, through the pandemic as a single person, solo. There's the numbers of, cases on depression and suicide, just from the loneliness and all those things that have taken place. I just feel that for those that have decided, years ago, this is something they want to do, this is the time to do it like never before, because these children are in need. We find that, able-bodied people with good jobs have lost their jobs. That may have put them in a position where maybe their children may have to move in with a family member, things of that sort. I just know that the pandemic greatly impacted this space.
What do you see, or let me put it this way, based on what you've experienced so far and what you've learned so far, what should our audience, what advice would you give our audience to help them kind of look at adoption maybe in a different light? And certainly for those who, like you said, they have the resources, the tools, and even the heart to adopt, but they never thought of themselves in that light. What are some of the things that they should be considering that might make them, tip over and say, yes, I'm going to take that step?
Yeah, I think, one thing I still say to my mentees, it's not all about you, boo. And so if we can just take the heart of a servant to know that if you have it in your heart to be of service to someone else, that this is something you should consider. Again, sadly, many people have considered it and they just don't move forward. And I don't see that they move forward for any other reason but for fear. And when you look at the opposite of fear is love, right? So move in a place of love. Do your research. I don't want this to be looked at, in a cavalier manner, like going to buy a new handbag, because it's more than that. But I don't say that you live in a place of paralysis for any longer period of time. I think you should move forward. Do research on agencies. Do research on, social service organizations. I think, again, for me, what I have found is the biggest barrier has been the person. It hasn't been anything else, because there are tons of resources out there. There's tons of information out there to help navigate you through the process. One of the reasons that my partner and friend and I, Tamara Brown, started Black Adoption Matters is for that very reason, because she was going through this process. She had bought a piece of merchandise off of my website, and I reached out to her, and then I come to find out she was going through the process. But admittedly, she was going through it alone. And so we're here to help you. And so I say that for anyone who's interested, don't look at this like it's something you need to do alone. I mean, there are, again, tons of agencies and organizations that can help, as well as Black Adoption Matters, which is what we are promoting and hoping that people can go to our website and take a look and find the resources that they need so that they can take the first step.
We may talk a little bit more about Black Adoption Matters, but since we're here, how would our audience, what's the website address? How would they engage and access that resource as a kind of a starting point for this project?
Sure. Yeah. So it's blackadoptionmatters.com, and that's spelled all the way out for all the words. And you also can go, when you go to the website, and sign up to subscribe. We will be sending out e-newsletters and blogs with more information. There's a resource tab that gives you tons of books. We can also add your friend's book to that as a tool as well. We found that people that are in a place of fear, it's because, again, they don't have someone to hold their hand, help them through the process. They don't know where to begin, what first step to take. And so we're here to help them through that process through Black Adoptions Matters.
Listen, again, this subject fascinates me, but one of the things you said earlier about this as an opportunity, and I always tell people, first of all, I'm very passionate about mentoring. Everybody knows.
Yes, me too. Me too. Yes.
I always tell people, I don't mentor because I'm like doing them a favor, that it accrues so many benefits to building relationships with people and feeding into people. And some of my mentees, relationship is 30 years old, or more. Mm-hmm. And I say, you get back more than you put in if you really do it with the right heart.
Yes.
And that struck me because, in addition to you mentioning mentorship early in our conversation, you also talked about adoption as an opportunity for not just for the adoptive child, but for the potential adoptive parent. Yes. And here's what I mean. One of the things that really, really served my spirit, and as a man of faith, I shouldn't have even been surprised by it. But what helped me get through emotionally, mentally, the isolation, what we were watching every day on television, and the numbers of people hospitalized and dying, and what are we going to do? And we can't work, and the economy shut down. We know what we've been through. We're still going through it now, but it's not as bad as it was this time last year. And I realized that, and not that I was not doing any acts of service, but the more I was, I started, donating to a food bank, not once in a while when I thought about it, but I just made it a recurring donation. Mm-hmm. And it just felt good to see that hit my account. Yeah. And I started doing other things. And I realized that the more I was serving and finding ways to give and help others, the better I felt, the better I was psychologically, the better my quality of life, even though my circumstances, technically, financially and otherwise, had not changed at all. And so I just think of that exponentially when you talk about, and again, we're talking about the crisis of a pandemic, but we have all kinds of challenges in life that can make us not necessarily approach life with the kind of gratitude and thankfulness and appreciation that we should. But service always does the trick. Talk to me about that when you're talking about, and we're already looking at, I just saw another article on LinkedIn about this generation of burnout that people are, we were disillusioned, and the pandemic woke us up to some realities that we weren't facing when we were running and gunning and busy all the time. how that this is a potential way to really bring meaning to your life in a way that money's not going to do it, a handbag is not going to do it, another job is not going to do it. Even just talk to me about that, because you do a really great job of that in the book, and I just hear that coming from your spirit even as we have this conversation.
Yeah, there are a couple of folks that, my friends know that I idolize. And one of them was the great Muhammad Ali. And as we know, that old adage or quote, or however you want to put it, is, the service to others is the rent that you pay to live here. And so if you have that mindset, to your point, it takes whatever pressures you're dealing with, whatever, strains that you might have on your life, and put them on the back burner for that very moment to be able of service to someone else. This is just who I am. I mean, my parents raised me this way. My dad had grocery stores, pretty much all over, not all over, but quite a few in the city of Chicago. And I would watch him as people came in unable to pay for the grocery bill, and he would just go around and get a box and just fill the box up and send them on their way. And so and I even look at it from the perspective for my godchildren, prior to Joshua even coming along, we would go every Thanksgiving to the Salvation Army and feed the less fortunate. It is such a feeling of, you get inspired when you're able to put a smile on someone else's face. It gives you the shot in the arm to think beyond your circumstances when you're able to assist someone else. And to your point, when you look at us going through what we're still going through, potentially, you get so much more back, right? So whatever you need to do to fuel your tank, do that. But I can tell you, providing a service to someone else will help you do that.
Talk to me, and this is kind of somehow along the same lines. We learned, many of us, maybe all of us, through this experience that we're going through, the importance of self-care. And if you're a parent, though it's very easy to burn yourself out, whether it's you may have work, business, job, other things you have to do, and then you have a child. How important it is to you, or what is your approach, let me put it that way, to taking care of Deborah O. Farmer so that she can be where she needs to be throughout her life, and certainly to Joshua? Yeah,
well, because again, you can't change your core. I mean, you can make adjustments, but that is who I am, a giver. So I have to fill myself up, or I can't pour from an empty cup. And so to that end, I fill myself up by, going to the movies. That's my guilty pleasure. That's my self-care. Unfortunately, during the pandemic, we weren't able to do that as much. But as soon as I felt safe enough, that was the first thing I did, was went to the movie theater for $5 Tuesdays. And so, self-care is very important, especially if you're in a place of service, because you have to fill yourself up in order to pour into others. Another thing for me too, and as much as I love pouring into my mentees, I love sitting at the feet of my mentors. That's self-care to me. I just listen to, their stories. I listen to their wins, the things that they lost, and learn from that. That helps me in so many ways as well.
I know you pay great tribute to, I think one or two of your mentors, maybe three, I'm losing count, but you go out of your way to pay tribute to those who were mentors to you in your life, both professionally and personally. So I deeply appreciate, again, as someone who's passionate about mentoring and who has been blessed with great mentors.
Yes.
I could talk with you forever about that, because I just really think
it's so important.
Yes, it's not a nice to do, it's a need to do. And
absolutely.
It's not a need to do for the person receiving it, it's a need to do for us who are doing the mentoring. Talk to me about what your hopes are, what you see going forward. And I'm going to put these in two buckets for you on your journey. Again, he's 5, but going to be 10 at some point, and 15. And you may have to talk to me, because I've been through the teen thing.
I'll call you up. I have your cell number.
The terrible twos is just a warm up for the terrible teens.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, you're still on this journey as a mom. It's the front end. It's fun, it's new, but raising a child is not a piece of cake. It's worth everything you put into it. I'm speaking from experience. Father is still the most important title I've ever had in my life. But it's the title I treasure the most, and that means something to me. But I tell people, just because it was rewarding doesn't mean it was easy.
Right.
That said, what are your hopes in for yourself and the growth that you're going to experience going forward as you and Joshua grow together? So that's one bucket. And the other bucket is, what do you hope to see? What is your desire, hope, recommendations, whether it's from policy perspective or just from what Black people do in this space? What do you hope for adoption? What do you hope can and should change to create more adoptive opportunities, to get more Black kids adopted and get more Black professionals, entrepreneurs, and others to, like you said, get out of their own way, as you said, to look at this as a serious choice that has just benefits all the way around?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the end. What I really hope to see, this space is unregulated. So they can pretty much, it's not regulated. They can pretty much do whatever they want to do. And I say that from a private adoption perspective. Knowing people could charge you whatever they want to charge you to do this it's disgusting. Let's just put it that way. So that would be one piece too, to see this to be a regulated industry, to find ways to change policy. There was in the city of Chicago, in the state of Illinois, a bill that was passed where if you are going on maternity leave, this is factored in if you're in the process of adopting a child. And so just things like that, although I think it was just 3 days, and even to incorporate into that too, if you were going through fertility treatments, that's not enough time, but it's still a start. Another area of really what I want to see happen, especially as it relates to Black people, Black women in particular, is we need to have the initial conversation around fertility. I don't necessarily say that people that are choosing adoption they're doing this because there were no other options. But in some cases, this does become their only option. And in that, if we had conversations sooner about fertility, then I think we would be a little bit more aware of getting here. The other part too is really being more sensitive in this space. I can just imagine for those that, choose to even do this much later because maybe they were, paralyzed by fear so much earlier on, for us not to put them in a place of even more shame. Well, why are you doing this at 50 years old? Or why are you doing this at 55? Well, so what? Right. And so I just really want us to be able to support one another. That's another desire I have in this space, and not go at this alone. Again, I can just think of churches that have women's organizations. This needs to be in the DNA of every church ministry that you talk about adoption. We're talking October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Yes, we need to talk about that. But November is Adoption Awareness Month. We need to talk about that. And so I just really want this to be integrated into the common, monthly themes. June is Juneteenth, but May is Foster Care Awareness Month. And so I just want this to be an more open conversation. When I think back to pop culture, we grew up on shows that normalized this, From Different Strokes. Arnold and Willis were foster kids and then they got adopted. Punky Brewster grew up in Chicago and was adopted by Mr. Henry. So there were so many shows, in our earlier years where we actually saw this integrated into the DNA of the program. We sort of see it now with This Is Us and Modern Family. I just want us to be in a position to normalize the conversation around adoption.
I think you make a really important point about, one, expanding, and somewhat is happening, but really being more intentional about honoring the definition of family. And so often it's like, well, that's not your real, or if you're a Black male, and again, people hear Hill Harper is adopting a child, and it's like, why are you doing that?
Exactly.
What is that all about? And I've heard people say some very insensitive things, both to adoptive parents about their reasons and timing for adopting, and to adoptive people who about whether, that somehow their relationship with their parents is not quite as legitimate or quite as authentic as if they were raised by their biological parent. And you just that point strikes a chord with me, because I was just also reading on LinkedIn yesterday about even the definition and the rules around family leave, bereavement leave, maternity leave, and how it's been so narrowly defined in major corporations that it doesn't really serve the needs of all the people that we care about as family that don't fit in this narrow definition of immediate family.
Yeah.
And some enlightened companies and corporations are redefining that to really be more sensitive and acknowledging that. But I see adoptive parents and would-be adoptive parents and foster kids and still struggling.
Yeah.
And struggling against the stigmas and the double and triple standards around that.
Yeah.
And what about the challenge, or how can I put this? The idea that if you're going to adopt, and your original expectation was you were going to adopt as a dual parent household, there's also this kind of stigma that if you're going to do it, it should be two people. And why? Talk to me about even that stigma and how that really needs to be overcome and changed.
Yeah, it's so interesting that the very place that I started, which is on this journey as a single person, I ended up here anyway, right? And so I think a lot of, for me, I think we need to just change the conversations that we had as a people, our those conversations at home over, breakfast with your family or those weekend barbecues, where we put so much pressure on, especially Black women, to don't settle, go get a good job and get a good degree, but no one is pulling them over to say, well, let's have a conversation about when you're going to start your family and how do you plan to start your family. And so I think really, for me, when I think about how we can just, again, make this a part of the everyday conversation, it just needs to start now.
In the time we have left, and I kind of foreshadowed this in my earlier question, what do you see happening with your own growth as a mother of Joshua? Now we don't know. Like you said, we make plans and God goes,
Yeah, he does.
But again, every parent has hopes for themselves, hopes for their lives, hopes for their child. And I'm talking about the short run. I always tell people, how are you going to ask them what do you want to be when they grow up when they're 5 years old? But what can we look for from you as an advocate in this space, as a person who is living this life? You're not just talking about it as someone detached from it, but you are living this life and you made these choices. And your book, again, I recommend My Journey to Joshua to anyone who is even considering this. I think it's really something that's going to help you along the way.
Thank you.
But tell me about what it means for you and your continued growth as an adoptive mother who is championing this idea of adoption.
I think for me, it's really, I really want to just put myself in a position of, they say, others are freed by the words of your testimony, not to say that I want to be the poster child for this conversation, but I do want to be a relatable figure in this space to help women in particular, not only see that this can be a pathway that they can take. That is really something I'm super passionate about, because if I tell you, if I counted on my hands, 10 of my closest friends, 8 of them probably want secretly to do this, and a couple may reach out and say something. So I just want this to be a more comfortable conversation for all. That's a big desire. As it relates to Joshua, I want him to be comfortable with this conversation as well. I don't want to label him like, oh, Joshua's the adopted child, but there has to be removing the stigma from being an adopted child as well, because we tend to look at it, and not to say that all adopted children feel some place or feeling of abandonment, or, they were an afterthought, if you will, but they really are in the best position to know that someone loved them enough to give them to someone else, and that someone loved them enough to take them. And so they're like right in the middle of this. It's like a sandwich, right, of love. And so I really want him to, and I see it already in him because he's such a loving kid, to be in a position to help others, his peers. I mean, we have a friend that has a little girl that's his age that's adopted. You know, I call her Wheezy and he's George from the Jeffersons because they just remind me of two little old people. But, you know, when it's time to have this conversation with both of them, he sort of knows because I'm, you know, oftentimes talking about it. He sees my book, but I haven't fully set him down because I don't think he's ready yet. But when he's ready to where he's comfortable enough to share it and help others that are in this space as well.
You know, I'm a passionate believer in what you're doing, because I always tell people, you know, fatherhood and motherhood and any legitimate relationship it's about a code of conduct. It's not just about how you became related in that way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether you're raising biological children, children through marriage, children through adoption, through foster, there's a difference between relatives and family. And family is a code of conduct. And if we focus more on family, you know, in my world, or at least in my point of view, you don't think of, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you don't think of Joshua as your adoptive son.
No.
You think of him as your son.
Yeah.
And to the degree you may have 10 other children by various means.
Yeah.
It's not going to be, yes, these are my sons and daughters, and then these are my adopted sons and daughters.
Yeah.
Because when it's about the love, and I share your sentiment about love driving out fear, which is not just our sentiment, it's God's word.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it really is all about. And so I just am very much inspired by your example, not just as an adoptive parent, but as a person who is like, I'm applying love to a situation that is a solution for our society, and bypassing the barriers, the fears, the stigmas that block love and that prevent love from doing what it was created to do. Yeah. So in a final word, and if those who have heard our conversation, who are in our audience right now, could only remember one thing, you wanted to leave them with one thing, that if they were going to forget 55 minutes of this and only remember the last 3 minutes of this, what would you want them to carry away from this? You know, sometimes when we were in college, you lived in the lecture hall, and you only remember the last thing the professor said. After I've been sitting here for 55 minutes. But what would be the thing that you would think is the most valuable takeaway, in addition to any other resources or reasserting the Black Lives Matter website so people can follow up from this conversation? But what's the one thing you want to leave them with?
Simply to choose love over fear. That would be it. I would just want them to not move in a place of fear and move in a place of love. So choose love over fear. That ultimately is what this is.
Listen, Deborah, I'm so glad you took the time to have this conversation, to join me on Beyond the Hype. Please, again, I urge you, check out the book, My Journey to Joshua, Finding Love Through God's Grace and Adoption. And by the way, I recommend you read it even if you're not thinking about adoption. Yeah. There's more to the book. It's the way you tell your story. So it's not just, oh, I adopted this kid and here's what happened. And there are a lot of good books that really just focus on here's the process and how to get through it. This really gets into what I think is, to your point, the heart and mind, the mindset that help you recognize this not just as a potential responsibility to take on, but a potential opportunity to improve your life, not just the life of the child, but to improve your life. So again, I urge everyone to get a read. It's a good read. It's a quick read. I love quick reads because I'm busy. It's a very, very good read. And you don't have to be a prospective adoptive parent to benefit from the book. In fact, more importantly, even if it's not for you, you might be able to help someone else who is considering this or should be considering this to find their way emotionally past the fear to the love to the decision. And again, it's blackadoptionmatters.com. Is that correct? That is correct. And also they can go to myjourneytojoshua.com as well. Absolutely. Deborah, thank you. Thank you very much. Beyond the Hype. I loved your energy when we first met in Chicago. Thank you. And in front of Harold's Chicken, right? In front of Harold's Chicken. What a better place to meet. Right. But it was just great to have you on. Thank you for agreeing to be on the show on the spot on such short notice. As soon as I met you, I was like, I need to have her on the show. I was so grateful for that. That you talk about divine intervention and divine connections. You know, he makes no mistakes. So I'm so grateful. I know what he's doing. We don't know what he's doing because you'll get it later. Just do what I tell you to do. So, thank you so much, Deborah. Thank you. On the show. Thank you. Have a great day. I appreciate you. Likewise.
Take care.
This is Alfred Edmond Jr. with another great edition of Beyond the Hype. Senior Vice President, Executive at Large at Black Enterprise, the #1 media brand, digital media brand with more than 8 million unique visitors a month. My digital vice president, so I get that right. And we're just glad you're here for us. Be here for the next edition of Beyond the Hype.